Okay, so this is the second video in how to build an FPV freestyle drone. This is for a 5-inch drone. If you guys are wondering how to build a 5-inch drone, if you want an overview of the parts that I used in this build, I did a video a little while ago. I'll put a card in the corner to that video where I talk about all the parts I used in this. This is just going to cover how I put this together. I'm going to use some high resolution photos here so you can sort of zoom in and get a good idea of how this is put together. Now I designed this build with very simple parts so that the build can go together really quickly and easily. Obviously there's some constraints here because of the frame I'm using here, because of the sort of squished down top plate, and you can see here there's only about 20 millimeters between the top plate and the main plate, so you don't have a lot of room for components, and this is one of the reasons why I selected the HGLRC. This is the F4 V6 Pro. It's a single board with flight controller, PDB, and video transmitter all in one. And that's the first part that I actually mounted in here. I mounted the flight controller first, and then I tinned all of the solder points for the ESC, receiver, and camera. And then at that point, went ahead and tinned up my ESCs, cut the wires to length here for basically for all four corners. And you can see that they're just soldered into the corners of the flight controller board. And once I did that, I mounted up the ESCs, soldered up the ESCs to the flight controller. There's 3 solder points for the camera. Let's see if I can show you that right here. So there's 3 solder points for the camera right there. That goes to the Cadex. This is a Turbo SDR1 or SDR2, sorry. And you probably want to mount the camera first. This is what I did. I put the camera in first. About the same time I mounted the flight controller. So basically the order you want to do is camera, then mount the flight controller, and then you want to solder on your 4 ESCs. And then I think the receiver, which you can see right there, is just soldered on to the wiring loom that's plugged into the front bottom, which is front bottom of the flight controller, and that's going to be right there. That's the wiring loom that's included. So just 3 soldering points for that. The flight controller comes with MMCX connector and a little adapter wire right there in black. Goes into the back here to an SMA adapter, and then I'm using a Foxeer Pagoda antenna here out the back. I have my XT60 wired onto the flight controller, and I'm also using the included capacitor as well. That's just plugged out the back. And so, yeah, for this kind of frame where there's not a lot of room, where basically you have room for 1 or 2 boards, this is going to be your sort of ideal setup. Obviously, you can go with a PDB flight controller all in one, and not go with the video transmitter as well. And then you can have a second board for video transmitter here. You definitely would have room for that. So after you have your ESCs soldered on, you want to basically mount your motors, and then I have this sort of weird way of wiring up my motors. This is not the way you want to do it. I'm only doing this because I didn't want to cut the wire short, because I may want to use these motors in another build later. This is not ideal. You basically want to cut the wires short and solder them directly to the solder pads. I have the wires basically the original length. I just have them wrapped around like this, and I'm using some cloth tape to hold everything together. The only reason I'm doing this is because I probably will be moving this motor to another test rig some point in the future, and I didn't want to have to re-extend these wires later on if I'm going to be using an all-in-one, a 4-in-1 ESC instead of individual ESCs. So this is, if you want to know how to not build a drone, this is definitely not the ideal way to do it. I'm just doing this because I want to reuse these motors somewhere else at some point in the future. So that's pretty much it in terms of getting the build together. As I mentioned before earlier, I just use some, the key to this simple build is using this all-in-one flight controller VTX PDB. So there's less wiring work to be done in terms of connecting up an extra board. So every time you have an extra board, you have to wire up that board to the other board. Since everything's in one board here, there's a lot less soldering to do. So this build really didn't take me very long at all. I think I spent maybe 35 or 45 minutes soldering up stuff and mounting things. It really was a pretty quick build, and if you're looking for an easy build, using this set of parts is a good way to go. Obviously the downside to using an all-in-one board like this is that if you have a component failure, say if the VTX burns out, then basically your flight controller and your PD are also no good as well. So that is a risk you're taking. So if you would, are worried about VTX burning out, maybe use something like the F4 Flame, and then a separate video transmitter on a 30 by 30 board, because 2 boards will definitely fit in here. But then you'll have to do some extra wiring if you want to do that. Now, in terms of Betaflight setup and tuning and all that, I'm not really going to go into that in this video, but I do have 2 other videos where I already talk about a general Betaflight flash and also my Betaflight setup. So I'll put 2 cards in the corner for that. There's one video on how to flash Betaflight, and there's a general video on how to flash Betaflight to most flight controllers. So I was just following that video. And then there's another video where I go over my specific settings, the kind of things that I like to put into my flight controller. I'll put that video also in the corner as well. So I would suggest going to those 2 videos and watching those in terms of setting up the software on this particular board. I didn't do anything particularly fancy on this setup. For example, on these ESCs, these are 32-bit ESCs. You could send telemetry back to the flight controller, for example, for RPM data, temperature control, that kind of stuff. I didn't actually do that in this build because I wanted to keep the build simple. Obviously, there's a lot of extra features you could enable and set up for a particular build. I just wanted to keep this one as simple as possible and make the build as quick as possible. So those kind of things are going to be covered in this video. So that's going to do it for this video, for the build overview. I'll have another video where I do the flight demo for this and possibly some PID tuning, but I have a feeling that there's probably not going to be any PID tuning for this one because I think these are all really top-notch components. Things should be pretty good in terms of the PIDs. I think I should be able to fly this with the default PIDs, but in case I can't, I'll have a PID tuning video, but probably not. But if I do, that'll be in the flight demo in the 3rd part of this video series.